of Abraham and Sarah, as well as St. Paul's recollection of the faith of Abraham in the second reading in Romans, testify to us that it is never too late in our life to testify to others how God has worked and will work in our lives. We are called upon at times in our life to relate to others how some miracle, whether great or small, happened to us or those that we love as a result of our faith that God would provide. When we do this, it's a benefit to those that are in our family, those that are our friends, and even sometimes to strangers. In the psalm, all the psalms are usually attributed to David. David says that he has been thankful for all the times that God came to his aid throughout his life. He was thankful that God supported him even from his mother's womb. He was thankful that even now, as he had old gray hairs, as it is said in one tradition, one rendering of that scripture, that God would continue to support him, continue to help him, that he had faith because of the faith that he had exercised in the past had been brought to fruition through God's grace. He had more faith that God's grace would continue. Now in Genesis, Abraham had been told in Bible years, about 1,000 years after the Garden of Eden, to leave his family, kindred, friends, and to go to a new place where God said, I will bless you. I will make you the father of a great nation. And being the father of many descendants has long been a desire of human beings. And God said to Abraham, not only a small family or a large tribe, but a nation. And through that nation, all the nations of the world will be blessed. So get up and go. And his name at that time was Abram. Later, God renamed him Abraham. He left. He exercised faith by leaving the area of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers and traveling northwest to Haran and settling there while God promised that someday I will give you a great land, which turned out to be Canaan, for your nation to live on. I will give you that land. So he had faith enough to leave. You might say it was a step of blind faith. It would have been more comfortable to stay there with all his fellow brethren in this extended family, because he only took his close family with him to go. And he kept the faith through all those years. The story of Abraham and Sarah, Sarah behind the curtain, chuckling to herself when these strange emissaries, these foreigners, these angels appeared at the edge of Abraham's property at a tree as they were traveling, and he saw them at midday. Now, the tradition of the Middle East is that you always are prepared for unexpected guests, whether they're friends, relatives, or foreigners. It was considered a grave insult if people didn't arrive at your house and you didn't offer them some refreshment or rest. It is a great tradition to share meals in the Middle East. In the age of fast food, we've devalued sharing meals. But the sharing of meals with one another is a type of communion, one person to another. When these guys showed up, there's different interpretations into Scripture as to who they were. There seems to be one that's a leader, these angels. Some say that that leader was actually Jesus. But the most common interpretation says that these three traveling angels stopped at Abraham's tent on the way to where? Sodom and Gomorrah. He's going to make waste. Well, you see, in this storyline, if you know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, you think that this is just a passing way station for these three angels on the way to their main task. That is, investigating the immorality of Sodom and Gomorrah. But that was really not the main purpose. The main purpose was to come to Abraham's tent and to remind him again of the covenant that was made, that he would bear offspring and form a great nation. Years had passed since God had made this covenant with Abram back in the Tigris and Euphrates River area. He was young then. And it says in the scriptures that God appeared to him then and told him what he was going to do for him. So a lot of years have gone by, and there's been no offspring. Sarai, as some pronounce it, is barren. Now he still has a kindling of faith inside of him that can be fanned and come back to warmth. And these angels say, when I come back next year, your wife is going to bear a son. And even Abraham laughed to himself. But behind the tent wall, overhearing the conversation, Sarah kind of chuckled out loud, where Abram could not hear, but the angels heard. And sure enough, after the angels had taken care of business in Sodom and Gomorrah and brought Lot, Abram's relatives, out so that they would be spared, they did come back a year later, and she was bearing a son. So it's 3 times in these scriptures that God appears to Abraham and promises that he will have a great nation. Paul reminds us about another 1,000 years later that Abraham had faith for a long time, even when there appeared to be no chance. I mean, it says in one version of the scriptures that he was 99 years old and that she had become past the point where she would have pleasure in her marriage. You'd have every reason to believe that God was not going to follow through on his covenant promise. But yet, in their old age, in his old age, he continued to believe. It's never too late for any of us in our life to testify of God's work in the past and in the future. Even when our hairs are gray, even when maybe people are not so nice to us, we can still be the source, like Abraham, of a miraculous change in others' lives. It's for the great benefit of others that we're here to serve, and we're here to love and adore our Savior. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.